I'm gonna drive my daddy's Thunderbird. White, red, ride 66, so glam, it's absurd. I'm gonna put her in the backseat and drive her to Tennessee. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tennessee. Drive her.
Hello, it's your good friend and neighbour, Old Fowley. This weekend just gone saw the monthly Brisbane second-hand record market held on this occasion at Coorparoo, which is on the southeastern side of the city of Brisbane. So of course that meant an early start for us. So we set off at 10:30 the night before, half an hour before we went to bed, packed 3 days' provisions in the car and set out on one of the coldest mornings in living memory down the pockmarked remains of Highway 1 into the belly of the beast, Brisbane. Unlike the Aspie edition of this sale, which is basically a long corridor of end-to-end records, Coorparoo is on the street and in the plaza of a shopping centre. And it's a bit of a wind tunnel, and it's especially freezing at this time of year. Now, it should be abundantly clear to viewers by now that I hate wintertime with every fibre of my being. It is antithetical to my nature. Being a Queenslander, I'm virtually a poikilotherm, needing, as we Queenslanders do, to lie on a flat rock in the sun to absorb heat from the environment to power even my basic bodily functions. The prices in this edition were as cold as the weather, generally a bit higher than my previous visit, and I noticed a few of my favourite vendors were missing, so it was with some trepidation that I rubbed my numb little fingers together and got to picking. Let's look at the highlights of the day. First up, a record that anyone who knows me will find hard to believe that I don't have on vinyl. But I don't. I have it on CD, but never on vinyl. If I were to make a list of my 20 favourite albums of all times, this would be one of the very first ones that I put on the shortlist. It is, of course, the soundtrack to The Harder They Come. It is a magical record, crammed with wonderful examples of the kind of music that wasn't quite yet reggae. You've got Leslie Kong's commercial breakout stylings, Jimmy Cliff's Otis Redding-influenced slammers. I can hear Sam Cooke in the incredibly soulful Rivers of Babylon. There's proto-reggae with Johnny Too Bad and Shantytown. And the title track, that perfect halfway point between where Rocksteady was re-energising and starting to incorporate the organ shuffle which defined early reggae. I am very glad indeed to have found this one. While we're making lists of things, something that I'm ordinarily loath to do, were we to make a list of my 12 favourite guitarists who weren't Jimi Hendrix, one name that would certainly be there is the late, great Andy Gill, who played in the seminal English group The Gang of Four. This is Songs of the Free, their third album. It's the end of a journey for the band as they arrive at what seems like a more commercial sound, very dance and dub oriented. The rhythms are more propulsive, but the mood is more dour and oppressive. But this does nothing to ameliorate the intensity of the band, and this is an excellent and representative album of their catalogue. I know some fans who were disappointed when this album was released, but Gang of Four are a necessary and essential band, and I think this album is a logical and exciting extension of the sound they were developing. You might recall from my Melbourne video how recently I treated myself to a copy of Wilder, the second album by The Teardrop Explodes, and how I commented on how different it was from their first album, Kilimanjaro. Well, as I walked into the sale, I chanced to see on the right of me a crate, the first album of which was a copy of Wilder. Okay, I thought, where there's smoke, maybe there's some fire, so I started flipping through that crate. 1 was Wilder, 2 was the copy of Songs of the Free I just showed you, and 3 was Kilimanjaro. Manic, cranked up garage psych with swirly keyboards, punching horns, and Cope swaggering like a full-blown rock god, just starting out his long career of equal parts madness and magnificence. Now, the Teardrop Explodes were from Liverpool, and of course there's one band from Liverpool that people on the VC just love and can't stop talking about, Echo and the Bunnymen, who also made their debut in 1980. The two bands were closely related. Julian Cope and Ian McCulloch had been frequent bandmates previously, but what the Teardrops have in exuberance, the Bunnymen have in intensity. It's a source of lively debate amongst the Bunnymen fan group as to the merits of this album vis-a-vis their third album, Porcupine. I'm in Camp Porcupine myself, but this is a fantastic record from a chronically underrated band. So imagine for a moment that you're Carole King. You're coming off a 15-week #1 album, the biggest selling album ever in Tapestry. How would you follow up a success like that? Well, what the real Carole King did was 9 months after Tapestry, she dropped the follow-up, Music. Surprisingly, given its historical and critical reputation, this is in fact a very good to slightly great album. It doesn't have the song-for-song strength of Tapestry, but what album really does? Although it's going to take some time, Sweet Season, Surely and Songs of Long Ago could easily replace something like Smackwater Jack on Tapestry. The legend has it that it was a flop, and while it didn't sell Tapestry numbers, it did get to #1 for 3 weeks, knocking off There's a Riot Going On before Don McLean's American Pie finally did for it. It is an undervalued gem of an album. Another thing I love about this is it has the original $5.95 price sticker from Parlings on it. Parlings was a legendary music store in Queen Street in Brisbane. I bought many records from there, but I also bought my favourite guitar, Black Betty, in August 1984, and I still play her most every day. If you like Tapestry, and tell me who doesn't, then music should probably be in your collection. Don't believe the anti-hype. It's perfectly lovely. Got me some good blues records. One guitarist who would certainly be on that hypothetical list is the great Albert Collins, who teams up with Robert Cray and Johnny Copeland on an epic album of blues showboating, Showdown. Robert Cray was just a kid on this, but he more than holds his own as the old friends Collins and Copeland throw bluesy hand grenades at one another. Everyone gets in for their share, and it's a rollicking good time from Go to Woe. We tend to think of the 50s and 60s as a golden era for the electric blues. Muddy Water, Howlin' Wolf, B.B. King, Sonny Boy Williamson, Magic Sam, Little Walter, John Lee Hooker. But the most popular and biggest selling artist of them all was Jimmy Reed. Found Love is a 1959 album which draws on songs from as far back as 1955 and contains a couple of Reed's biggest hits, Big Boss Man and Baby What Do You Want Me to Do. But there just isn't a weak song on it. Reed has his formula down pat here, the gently rolling rhythm, the parping harmonica, and Reed's sly, slightly lascivious vocals. Great fun. Another man whose name would most certainly be on that hypothetical list of favourite guitarists. In fact, if I could unlearn 45 years of bad guitar playing and learn to play guitar just like anyone, it would be J.J. Cale. And this is his 1974 album, Oki. Warm, unfussy, full of less is more aesthetic. Cale delivers no surprises, but you don't listen to him for surprises. You listen to him for the warm assurance of a man who is very good at what he does, and what he does is not do a lot. This one will spend an awful lot of time on my turntable in the coming weeks. You might recall from VC1 how impressed I was with finding XTC's Skylarking and how much I enjoyed it. Well, this is Mama, a couple of albums before Skylarking, but you can definitely see the seeds of what that album became being sown. There are still hints of the brasher band they used to be, but there's also a calmer, more Skylarking-esque moments. It's not as good, I don't think, as Skylarking, but the quantum of difference isn't great, and it just furthers my appreciation of this fascinating band. However, if Mama doesn't sit as highly in my estimation as Skylarking, this album, Oranges and Lemons, sits higher by a slightly greater margin. There's nothing about this album I don't love, from the cover to the vastly sprawling, good old-fashioned, slightly mad double album aesthetic. It's just knockout song after knockout song, and it does not let up. Side 1 barely pauses for breath. I love the fact that it too has its original price tag on it, $19.99 for a double album in 1989. Every sale I go to, I have a top dollar amount that I'm willing to pay for a record, and I allow myself one record that's above that number, and this was my above the odds records for this occasion. A great, mighty album, and one that I will treasure indeed going forward. Let's finish with some jazzy jazzbos. 2 selections to share here. Firstly, a Japanese version of Charles Mingus's first album as a leader, Pacanthropus Erectus. It's typically naughty Mingus. He always loves to play games, but these ones have a particularly satisfying payoff, particularly the epic title track that opens the album. Jackie McLean, remember him from the Melbourne video, plays alto here, and the killer team of Neshwe Ortigan and Tom Dowd produce. Great liner notes as well, written by Mingus himself. Finally, a record from 1956, which makes it one of the oldest artefacts in my not very big, not particularly interesting, in no way strategically curated and certainly not well looked after record collection. It's a recording of George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue and An American in Paris. Genius is not a word I use frequently or freely on this channel, but I believe George Gershwin was one of the authentic geniuses of Western popular music, simply for the scope and the phenomenal productivity of his work before his unexpected and early death in 1937. Gershwin wasn't a formally trained composer. Maurice Ravel once turned down his request for training with, "Why be a second-rate Ravel when you're already a first-rate Gershwin?" But he longed to be taken seriously alongside them. When he wrote concert pieces like Rhapsody in Blue or An American in Paris or his great folk opera Porgy and Bess, Miles Davis's recording of which is probably my favourite record ever made, he went with what he knew, which was spontaneity and the ability to tap into a deep, unpretentious and unaffected emotion. And because of this and the fact that he got jazz, he managed to interpolate it into a tone poem format which was developed in the late 19th century by Liszt, Debussy or Sibelius. Jazz became fruitful ground for tone poetry. The title track of Pacanthropus Erectus is a tone poem, and rock acts later like Pink Floyd and Frank Zappa refined the tone poem to incorporate rock elements. But none of them have ever had the visceral primal hook of Rhapsody in Blue or the sense of wonder and otherness of An American in Paris. Well, there were a few other things that I got, but these are the most interesting, the most idiosyncratic, I guess. I hope you found this little diversion edifying and crave your indulgence, observation, or critique in comments. Till the next time we meet, may all your picks be fantastic and your skips be few.